now. Okay, I think whilst, just in case there's more students coming across, I think we'll start and then so we can just like introduce ourselves and stuff. So hey to the couple of people here. My name's Abby and I am a second year scientist at St. Peter's College, Oxford. So I'm one of the partners to UniReach. I'm associated with Insight Outreach, which is a charity similar to UniReach actually, but we offer mentorship for prospective students throughout the whole application to Oxford or Cambridge. So yeah, that's me basically. I don't know whether you guys want to, the panelists want to introduce themselves. Do you want to go in alphabetical order? I think that might be easiest. Or I don't know if I can hear you, Alice.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, excellent. So my name is Alice. I'm a second year engineering student at Jesus College in Cambridge.
Fab.
Shall I go? Hi, I'm Cleo. I am a first year doing history at St. Catherine's, Oxford. So yeah.
Hi, I'm Lara. I'm a first year doing psychology and linguistics at Pembroke, Oxford.
Hi, I'm Mary. I'm a second year doing human, social and political science at Christ College, Cambridge, and I've specialised in anthropology and sociology.
Brilliant, fab. So we've got a really quite a nice range of Cambridge students and Oxford students, and also lots of different disciplines here as well. So yeah, we should be able to get quite a good range of answers to the questions. I think we'll just kick it off, and then if people join, we can reintroduce and whatnot. So there's a couple of questions about myths here. Also, I forgot to say, if you guys have questions throughout as well, please put it in the chat, or there's I'll put the link up now actually, hold on. But yeah, so if you've got any questions about anything, yeah, just feel free to ask it in the chat for this breakout room. Where is it? There we go. Anyway, yeah, but like there's basically, you know where the chat box is. just ask a question and we'll see if we can answer it. But yeah, I think they've gotten rid of the link. So yeah, okay, we'll just start. Okay, so there's a question here which is basically, Oxbridge is all work and no play. What has been your experience of the work-life balance at Oxford or Cambridge? So should we have someone from Oxford and someone from Cambridge? So is Oxbridge all work and no play?
Okay, I'm willing to answer this. So I've always found for myself that I was always one that had a high workload, like throughout school and things like that. I took 4 A-levels when most people in my college were taking 3. I had various things going on. But I always found that if I didn't have like extracurriculars to do or just other things, I couldn't do the work. Quitting extracurriculars in order to have more time to do work actually made me less productive, I found, because I didn't have the things to work off. And I think my experience at Oxford has been that everyone thinks in a similar way. We do have a lot of work. That's kind of, you can't, lie about that. There is a lot of work. But the way we tend to cope with it is by doing loads of other stuff around it. I feel like it's all work and all play is how it feels like to me. I think if we didn't have the play, we wouldn't be able to do the work.
Yeah, I think that's so true, and I think it's probably quite similar at Cambridge. I think, my experience with Cambridge students is that they do work really hard, but they also do a million other things. And it seems like people just fit a lot into an 8-week term. And I think actually one of the most useful skills that I've learned at Cambridge is how to just get my work done. I remember, my second choice uni, when I was applying, I worked out that in my first year I wrote more essays than I would have in my entire degree at that university, and yet I was still able to like pick up extracurricular things. And I think you just learn that, like, okay, I've got this thing that I want to go to this evening, and I have an essay that I need to send in by 5, so I just will do the essay and I will go to this thing. And like, there's definitely an adjustment period, but I'd say now, like, as now I'm halfway through my degree, I really think it's a really useful skill that I've learned.
Fab, yeah. I'd say both of what you said definitely applies. And I think it's very true that there is this big sort of fear around applying to Oxbridge that you'll just like never ever ever have fun. And it's just not true at all. At the end of the day, it is a university, and you will have fun. There are, you'll be going on nights out. I know in my first year I took advantage of that. So it's, definitely don't think you'll be missing out if you think you want to apply to Oxbridge. Okay, debunking myth number 2. I'm not the Oxbridge type. Okay, basically people believing that they will never fit in. So how have you guys found, or did you find, settling in, how did you find it, like making friends, etc.? Do you fit in? Is there an Oxbridge type, essentially?
I can go if you want.
Yeah, fab.
I'd say this was a thing I was worried about, because at school I had like a very good group of friends and stuff, but you find your people, and I think it's the same as at any uni. It's not necessarily different. It's a big pool of people, even in a college system, and the more extracurriculars you do, being in a staircase helps as well, because you're very close with those people, especially with lockdowns. But the activities you do mean you encounter people with similar interests. And if you're into going to the bar, you're going to see people who also like to go to the bar. If you, for example, I joined like a feminist society in college, and therefore you meet girls like that who are interested in that kind of thing. So I think if you occupy the spaces you enjoy, you will find similar people, and it's just not a thing. It's not as much of a worry as I made it out to be, kind of in my head, at least.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's societies for basically every interest under the sun, and dozens of new societies get created every year. I find that the best descriptor of the Oxbridge, like the most accurate descriptor of the Oxbridge type that I found, is people that are just really passionate about something, even if it's not necessarily about their degree. And I find that this is really helpful in being able to strike up a conversation with somebody and having a good time, because usually we can find something that we're each passionate about and have a fun conversation.
Yeah, I think the only thing, I wanted to add to that was that I think there's often an expectation that Oxbridge will be full of sort of people from a certain background, maybe private school people who have debated their whole lives, or people who have had all these opportunities that you haven't had. And I just wouldn't say that was the case. Like, I mean, I think my college has a bigger percentage of state school people this year than some. There's definitely always different makeups depending on just who happens to get in that year. But I think it's so important to remember that people come to Oxford and Cambridge from all over the place, and the expectation that everyone will know everyone because they'll all have been to the same schools and you'll be on the outside is just not true. There's an element of that, but it's not the whole system, and it's not everyone's experience.
And like, just to give some numbers to that, I know at Cambridge it's about 70% state school, and I think the country as a whole is about 91% state school. So like, obviously that's a problem, and like that's something that needs to be fixed. But if you look at the next kind, like the really good Russell groups that you might otherwise be applying to, like Bristol, Exeter, UCL, LSE, their stats are so much worse than Oxbridge's. So I think you have to be like you definitely need to be aware that like, you know, like Cambridge has stuff to work on, but it is also, and Oxford, but it is also making progress. And like just in terms of numbers, like I think there are about 16,000 students at Cambridge. And so to say that there could only be one kind of person in those 16,000 just doesn't really make sense. So yeah, don't worry, there will be people for you. But I think that's something everyone worries about. But like, yeah, you will find your people.
Yeah, that's so true. I just want to say, you know, I personally, I am from a low socioeconomic background. I went to an average state comprehensive in North Wales. So, you know, I didn't really have it, you know, going for me from the off. But you know, like you guys have said, you find your people, you know, Oxford and Cambridge, there, you know, you will find people, you'll find similar interests. You don't have to be posh or privately educated or your father has to own half of Buckinghamshire. It's not true at all. Like we said, it really is just a myth. And as Mary even pointed out, you know, we're doing really well and working really hard to try and, you know, increase the number of students we get from state schools, and there's been a massive push for that over the last couple of decades now. So I'm seeing really, really good results from it.
Yeah, and just one thing to note about college choice here, you know, if it's really important to you, for example, that you're with people who are also like have been to state schools or like that kind of thing, you know, you can choose your college around that. Like, I don't know about Oxford, but Churchill College or Christ College at Cambridge, they have reputations for like having a lot of state school kids. Yeah, so, or if you're like a really sporty person, you can apply to a sporty college. Like that's the beauty of the college system. You can kind of tailor where you end up.
And that while that is true, I think it's also really important to note that if you get pooled or whatever and you chose your college, for example, because you're really into music and you wanted to do that, and then you end up getting pooled to somewhere where it feels like everyone does sport, you'll get there and that won't be true. Like, it might be the case on the websites or on the brochures you see, but there are people doing everything everywhere. Like, I am really into, it's a bit nerdy, but I'm into sort of quiz, and I do university quiz society and stuff like that. When I came to college, I was like, okay, I will be the only person doing this, so that's okay. And it turns out one of the other freshers is like also super into it, and we've done like intercollegiate quiz team and stuff like that. So there's always someone who's into it.
I'd maybe add that in this way, the college system is actually much better than other unis and can be really helpful, because talking to friends whose experiences differ at other unis, they aren't really friends with the year above in the same way, because obviously they live out in second year, whereas at my college, at least second and third years all live in, and that means you socialize with them as kind of equals. And it's so useful to have then even a bigger pool of people and people who've been through this too and can talk to you about it and be like, no, everyone's normal, you're going to be okay, kind of thing. And that, for me, having friendships with second years and stuff has been so nice and grounding and useful and really kind of benefited me. So yeah, I think college can be quite helpful in that way too.
Fab, yeah, definitely. I'd say the same thing about the college system. It's so useful. And just to link back to having sort of specific colleges for specific things, I think Oxford has Mansfield College, which is heavily state school sort of dominated. So if that's something that interests you, then definitely check it out. But like Lara said, you know, there's a good chance that you'll apply to a college and you'll be pooled. So Oxford and Cambridge, adopts a pooling system where basically if you apply to a college, there's a good chance that you'll probably get moved to a completely different college. And at the end of the day, you end up loving whichever college you go to. Well, generally anyway. Hopefully everyone loves their college. But yeah, that's normally what happens. Okay, so we've got a student has asked a question in the chat. So what would you say then is the most valuable supercurricular to put on your personal statement? Who wants to take that away?
I can start.
Yeah, go ahead, Lara.
Just because I remember when I was applying, there was I think he was from Oxford, I think he may have been from Christchurch, who came and talked to us about how to write a personal statement. And one of the things he said was that the type of supercurricular really doesn't matter, because they're really aware that some students will have had the opportunity to go to lectures with their school or go on trips or, you know, take part in summer schools, and other students won't have had those opportunities. So let's say you wanted to write, I don't know, you're writing a psychology personal statement and you wanted to write about how you found memory really interesting, just as an example. If you had been able to go to a lecture on memory and, you know, talk to an academic, great, you could write about that. You could say how that had interested you in this way. But just writing, oh, I went to this lecture on memory, wouldn't really impress the tutor, because anyone can go and sit at the back of a lecture on memory. It's being able to write about it. Oh, I went to this lecture and the lecturer talked about this, which I was really interested in, so I'm excited to learn more about that at the course. And you can do that equally just by having read a book on it, just by having read a book and genuinely had a thought about it and been like, so I was interested in this chapter and I was thinking about how it linked to the thing the author said at the end. And the tutor will value that equally as having gone to the lecture. It's not about the type of supercurricular, it's about how you write about what you learned from it.
Yeah, definitely. It's at the end of the day, I feel like if you just, in your personal statement, because that's why you put all your supercurriculars, if you just give like a huge list of the stuff you've done, it shows that it shows your interest, that you've decided to go out and do things beyond the scope of your A levels or your GCSEs, for example. But it doesn't show what you sort of learned from it and how you've interpreted the information and what you've taken from it. So, and that's what's important, because that's what they'll start sort of almost asking you about in your interviews. So yeah, definitely, like you said, don't explain what you got from it, like, and what it meant to you, etc. And does anybody else want to add to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's whichever one or whatever kind of supercurriculars have had the greatest academic impact on you, and that often overlaps with the ones that are the most impressive, but not always. So I think that, for example, if between like a kind of meh work experience and between a book that really fundamentally changed the way that you view your field, I think that talking about the book would be a lot more valuable, because you're able to put a lot more thought into it and because you would personally find it a lot cooler.
And I think that's a really key point about like the whole application process. The risk when we're saying like make sure you put in supercurriculars or you talk like this in your interview is that we make it seem as though these are kind of unnatural things that you should be doing. But ultimately, like, hopefully if you want to apply to Oxbridge, it's because you're really passionate about a subject and you want to learn more about it. And hopefully like the extracurriculars that you're thinking about putting in, the supercurriculars are just things you really enjoy doing and like you're interested in. And the ultimate aim in like the interview, the exams, like everything, is to just get your passion and your intelligence across. So don't think like, oh, I've got to go and read 10 books by like Jean-Paul Sartre or something, like something you're not interested in, just so that you can like look Cambridgey. Because then if you get to the interview and they ask you about it and you just don't show passion, then like it doesn't actually help you in the long run. So I think, yeah, you've got to bear in mind, like, there are loads of kinds of supercurriculars you could do. Like, you could listen to podcasts, you could watch YouTube videos, you could read The Guardian every day, you could go to museums, you could go on, go to lectures, you could read, you could listen to the radio. Like, find the thing that works for you and don't feel like you have to fit this kind of imaginary Oxbridge type.
Beyond this, I would just like to add, if anybody is struggling in finding an extracurricular that would be kind of academically oriented, one of the things that I found really helped me is to pick supercurriculars or extracurriculars that would help me decide if this is really a field that I want to do. They all had the great unintended side effect of making my application way better, because they confirmed that this is the field that I wanted to do. And if they had confirmed that it was not the field that I had wanted to do, then that would have also been a good thing. So I found that to be very helpful for me.
Yeah, that's a really good approach, actually. Yeah, maybe try and adopt something like that. I just want to also emphasize that there's almost like a lot of pressure for prospective students to get some sort of work experience related to their degree subject, and not everyone can do this. And this is purely on the basis of your socioeconomic standing. And I never had any work experience. I'm not sure if you guys did, but don't worry. Like, I know specifically for Oxford, they will never ask you to have any specific work experience, even for like particularly vocational courses such as law. I know maybe a little bit of experience from medicine might help, but like at the same time, you know, your application is not going to lose any weight if you don't have any like, you know, outstanding work experience beforehand. You know, they take into consideration your background. So yeah, that's that. So yeah, if you've got any other questions related to that or anything else, you know, feel free to put it in the chat as well. So I think we've had a little bit about the supercurriculars now, and writing personal statements. So I thought maybe we'll have a little discussion about the interviews, because I know that's another big Oxbridge thing. So yeah, how did you guys go about preparing for your interviews? Sort of like, what was your experience like? What are your sort of tips that you would give to prospective students?
I think I always find it difficult to give like no one really knows exactly why they got in. Like we did the reading, we sat like exactly where you're sitting now. I didn't think like, oh, I'm definitely going to get in. Like I wasn't sure that I would, but I just gave it my best shot and kind of did the sort of things we're talking about. And yeah, unfortunately I did, and I've loved it. I remember just like kind of being petrified all the way through. That's my main memory of that time, and just not feeling like I was good enough or like I was going to get in. And so sometimes I think I lacked motivation with like doing stuff, because I was like, oh well, it probably won't lead to anything. So I think it's so important throughout that whole process to remember that someone has to get in, and presumably you've got the predicted grades if you're applying. So like there's absolutely no reason why you can't get in, and someone has to. And yeah, like if your school's putting you forward, then they think you can get in. So like I think having confidence in yourself, and like if you're reading something, you know, a supercurricular, or like you're doing a personal statement and it's difficult, or the exam's difficult, or the interview's difficult, like don't stress, it's supposed to be difficult. And yeah, and the other thing I'd add is that like remember that there are lots of parts to the process. Like your personal statement is one part, the exam is one part, the interview is one part. Like my exam, I was really, really ill when I did it. So that's another thing. If you're ill, don't just sit it anyway and like pretend you're okay. But yeah, I sat the exam and it went so badly that they thought that English wasn't my first language. And then I got to my interview and they were like, huh, she seems to speak English. And I still got in, even though that one part was really, really bad. And I'm sure like it would have helped if had that been stronger. But yeah, just remember that like it's a holistic experience. It's like, yeah, it's a holistic process. And what they're ultimately trying to do is see whether you can thrive in this environment, and whether you'll enjoy it, and whether you'll add stuff to like the college that you're living in, and whether they'll want to teach you. It's not like a process of trying to catch you out or like show you that you're not good enough or whatever. They're very much on your side in the process.
And I think I found that what helped me most preparing for interviews was a mindset of how you should think about them, because an interview is not them testing to see if you're smart enough. It's not them testing to see if you're good enough. It's them testing to see whether you're the kind of person they want to teach, which is obviously like a really difficult, very subjective thing. And that's why no one ever knows for sure if they're going to get in, because it depends so much on what the tutors happen to be looking for, what the course is like. And I think obviously you want to hope that you can get in, but I think even if you don't, what helps most is the mindset of being like, the tutors know the course better than I do. If someone doesn't get in, the likelihood is it's because the tutors weren't confident that they could get the most out of the course. It doesn't mean that you're not good enough. It doesn't mean that the tutors thought you were terrible. It just means that they think that you might get more out of something else. Do you know what I mean? That they think this person might not get as much out of this course as someone else might. And you know what? That's good. If you don't end up doing a course that you won't get loads out of, that's a good thing. And I think it was that mindset of like, well, this is just to see whether I'm the kind of person they want, was what helped me, because then you realize that the interview isn't about trying to fit some mold. It's about trying to present yourself in the best way possible so that they can then make an informed judgment about whether you are the kind of person that will benefit. Because if you try and be someone you're not, chances are the person you try and be will be some stereotype of what you think an Oxford student is like, And all of those stereotypes almost invariably would be someone who would not do well in the course. All of the stuff about, yes, Oxford students always, or Oxbridge students always know what they're talking about, they always have opinions, and they never back down. You'd be a terrible student. You would not listen to your tutors. You wouldn't be fun to teach. So if you were trying to be that person, you probably wouldn't get in. Whereas if you were trying to be yourself and listen and be flexible and genuinely try and get something from the interview, it's more likely to happen. So in my opinion, I think you should treat the interview as like a tutorial, because that's what they're supposed to be, right? They're supposed to be like what a tutorial would be like. Look at it as trying to learn from the tutor and trying to explore, because this is a chance to speak to someone who is incredibly knowledgeable in your field about something that you're really passionate about. So, you take it as an opportunity to learn as much as you can and have a really interesting conversation, which can be difficult, I know, because it's really scary, but do as best you can. And that is probably the mindset that is going to make you most comfortable and most likely to put your best foot forward.
On that note, maybe I'd just say I entirely agree. My tutor, we were recently having this class, and she was talking about, especially for humanities, this idea of argument and how an academic argument or conversation is very different to an argument where you're kind of fighting your point and you don't back down. And I found it really useful even now to think about, because in the interview, they want you to argue and have a view, but that isn't necessarily a view where you said you wouldn't back down, you don't listen. It's about, and it's that thing of demonstrating how you think and how you would learn and argue a point without, but that's different to kind of this idea of being blatant and unabashed and constantly thinking you're right. There's a difference between kind of a confidence and an arrogance, which I think is interesting. I also, though, I'm like a preparer. I don't like going into things without preparing. So I did kind of prepare. And I think one useful thing, maybe, I mean, who knows, is I looked through my personal statement and the things I wrote and my written work, because for a lot of humanities at Oxford, you do have to submit a class essay or coursework. And so for my written work, I then did some extra reading around the topic. And I found that quite useful, because then when they asked questions, I had different viewpoints and had kind of engaged with it further. And I think that's quite a good practical way you can try demonstrate curiosity, is you've taken it further since your personal statement, or considered the views in your personal statement you put forward further. And maybe you disagree with yourself now, stuff like that. And then, yeah, because I liked to think that I had stuff to talk about, just to kind of reassure yourself. And that was quite useful for me.
To put forward a perspective from the sciences, so I don't know how applicable or how transferable this is to the humanities. So my interview didn't involve my personal statement in any way. And I got 2 tips from somebody who was currently at Cambridge when I was applying that really helped me. One of them was, for those of us in the sciences that are really used to like putting our heads down and then we just do the work and then we hand in the work, it can be really challenging to verbalize kind of our thought process. So I found it really helpful when I was doing my homework in school to practice saying the steps out loud and to kind of verbally explain, even if just to myself in my own, what I was doing. And if I had the opportunity to kind of try to teach it to somebody else, that was also very helpful, just to have practice saying things out loud. And the other thing that really helped me was, if I got stuck on a question, to remember to just say anything that seemed kind of sensible. Because otherwise I find that once you kind of get stuck in silence for 5 seconds, it's really difficult to kind of jump back in and say something intelligent. Whereas if you get yourself in the habit of blurting out something that's kind of on the right track, even if you don't really know where it's going to lead, at least you have a starting point, and the tutor will probably give you a hand if they sense that you're really stuck.
Yeah, actually, what I just wanted to add, based on what Cleo was saying, was I think it's really important. Obviously, you put so much work into prepping your personal statement and reading all this stuff, right? And you put everything interesting that you found into this personal statement. It's really important that once you've sent that off to UCAS, you don't just then sort of wash your hands and be like, oh, okay, I don't have to do any more extra reading, like I've done all my stuff, because think one of the most terrifying questions I got in the whole interview process was, it wasn't at my college, I went to a different college, because sometimes you'll go and interview all kinds of different colleges so they can figure out where you fit. And one of them asked me, what's something interesting in psychology that you've read that isn't on your personal statement? And you won't necessarily get that question, but I did. And I think it just illustrates that they do appreciate you having done reading beyond just the personal statement. I remember freezing because all that came into my head was linguistics. I couldn't think of any psychology. And she was going, well, something in your personal statement will be okay. And what came into my head was, oh, I read this article when I was doing a practice interview, and that kind of kicked in and saved me. So I don't think it's worth trying to prepare for individual questions. You might not get any questions on your personal statement, like Alice was saying, but equally you might. So it makes sense to prepare as if you might get questions on your personal statement, because then that's something comforting. Often, even if the tutors don't really care about your personal statement, they'll ask you something from it to try and sort of calm you down and get you in a state where you're feeling confident about what you're saying. So I think prepare what you can and then just go in and see, because it depends so much on just who the tutor is, what college you're at, how they're feeling that day. Like, it's not a standardized process, because they do what they need to figure out who's the best person. So yeah, I think just keep reading, keep doing what you can, and go in with an open mind.
Just one thing to add on to that, like, I think it's a really good point Alice makes, like, about how the interview will actually work, and they won't necessarily just talk to you about stuff that you've given them, or like talk to you about random stuff. The most terrifying part of my interview was they gave me an A4 piece of paper with like size 11 font, and the whole page was filled, and they were like, read this in front of us and then summarize the main arguments, and the interview was 25 minutes. So I was like, oh, so I can't spend like 15 minutes reading and analyzing this. And yeah, I wish I'd known that was the kind of question they could actually ask you. So practicing skills is really valuable, you know, like find an article that you think is quite difficult and just say, okay, in 10 minutes I want to read this and summarize it, like, and verbally summarize it. Or yeah, think like, what's going on in the news? If like, I mean, this is very particular to a social science interview, but like, what's going on in the news? What might they ask me about? Or maybe for history, like, if Churchill's being criticized in the news for being a racist or something like that, like, what would you say to that? But I really think, yeah, you shouldn't overthink these things, because hopefully if you're really keen about your course, like, you know, you'll already be kind of thinking these things and like engaging with the world and your subject. So yeah, definitely like prepare. And I wish I'd prepared more in hindsight, just so I would have been less stressed. But also, like, yeah, as Lara says, like, just breathe and remember that it doesn't define who you are as a person, how you do in your interview, and you're not a terrible person if you don't get in. Yeah, my college always says that they don't make admissions mistakes, but they do make rejection mistakes. So as in, everyone who gets in, like, deserves to have got in, but they will definitely have rejected people who would have really thrived at Oxbridge, but, you know, they didn't perform on the day or whatever, like something went wrong. Because in practice, like, you know, they want to make sure that everyone who's there is really, really worth it. And like, yeah, so it's they're more likely to, like, yeah, it's not that everyone who gets rejected would never have done well at Oxbridge. It just means it didn't work out at that point. So yeah, I think it's really important to go in remembering that you're still valuable as a person, and like, your academic success doesn't define you as a person.
That's really good. So some really like invaluable information there from all of you. Is really, really interesting to actually hear all your different perspectives. I just wanted to just quickly add in there that especially for the sciences, to maybe practice doing some Fermi questions as well. So I put it in the chat, and that's how you say, that's how it's spelled basically. But these are basically problems of estimation. So it's kind of like they'll ask you a question. So I know in my interview, I was asked, what's the volume of the atmosphere? And so you have to sort of make assumptions that the Earth is spherical. Oh, that you assume that the atmosphere is uniform density, for example. There's loads of different examples on the Oxford website. I'm sure there's examples on the Cambridge website as well. And you can type in and look for loads of Fermi questions on the internet as well. So definitely check those out if you're applying for a science related subject as well, because they'll be really, really useful for you. So it's 10:43 now. So I think we'll take a 2-3 minute break. I'm going to keep recording, so students, please don't turn your cameras on or turn on your microphones. But yeah, mentors, if you want to turn off your cameras and go for like a quick, drink break or toilet break, feel free. And we'll come back here at about 10:46. Is that okay? Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Fab, great.